Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. The topic for our podcast today is a very important topic, especially in today's world. When is the best time to get ready for an interview? I've always wondered that myself. I don't know that there's any, right or wrong, but I'm sure there is a best. With us today, the owner of A Plus Resumes is Martha Rockwell. She's been in the business for, let's say 20 plus years. I think it's at least that. And that is someone who is definitely an expert in her subject area. Martha, I'm really glad to have you with us today. So how would you start out as answer to that question? What is the best time to start preparing for an interview?
Okay, I always ask my clients this. When do you think is the best time to get ready for an interview? And I have never had the right answer. They'll usually say the night before, 2 days before, something like that, but that's really too late. The worst thing for me as a resume writer and a coach is for somebody to call me on a Monday and say, Martha, I have an interview Wednesday. Can you help me get started? It's a little bit too late. The best time to get ready for an interview is when you don't have one. Does that kind of make sense? Because let's say hypothetically you decide you want to look for a new job or maybe a promotion. So start then, because the more time you take to get ready for that interview, the better the outcome will be. If you wait till the last minute, the night before, 2 nights before, it's too late. You're going to find yourself cramming, a little bit nervous, and not have the confidence that you should have for taking the real time it takes to prepare. So that's kind of a surprise to most people. What do you mean the best time is when you don't have one? Think of how much time you can put into the actual interview practice if you're not under pressure, if you're not under the gun. And that's what's really, really important. So I'm telling you, the best time to get ready and to start preparing is when you don't have an interview scheduled. Does that make sense to you, Randy?
It does, but I'm probably not telling you any big surprise here, but it goes counterproductive to most people's thinking. The last thing in the world they think about is preparing for an interview when they don't have one. But I totally understand your point. That's exactly the way it should be done. In terms of preparing for an interview, is there certain things that you prepare for in every interview, and then do you add on some special attractions depending on what company you're interviewing for or perhaps what position?
Okay, so the most important thing is deciding the position that you're going for. Then look at the job description of that particular company. See what they're looking for, because when you go to an interview, they want to know 2 things. Can you meet the requirements of the job posting or the job description? Number 1. Number 2, can you make money? All companies are interested in making money. So look at the job description. Then, of course, your resume has to qualify you for that position as well. So I'm assuming that if you're going for a position, you've already got a resume that's going to help you, number 1, get the interview. That's important. Then after you look at the job description, kind of get an idea of what they're going to be asking, and then I would get a list of interview questions and write out your answers to interview questions. Let me reiterate. Number 1, your resume has to be updated appropriately for that particular position. Number 2, look at the job description, find out what they're looking for, and then take a list of interview questions that will apply to that particular position, write out your answers, and practice, practice, practice. Now, one of the biggest problems I find in interviewing is, how do you answer that first question? Tell me a little bit about yourself. That is one of the most important parts of the interview itself, because the minute you open your mouth, they're going to decide if you're the right person for the position. So I really need to focus on that first introduction question. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And you have to really, really have a good answer for that question. It should not be a dissertation on your life. They call it the 15-second introduction or the elevator speech, which means it should be no longer than 15 to 30 seconds. You've got to hook them in that first few seconds to at least start the interview off on a positive note.
Now you mentioned, Martha, that this is not a time to give them a history of the world part two. No. As related to your life. What, in terms of that 30 seconds, 45 seconds, whatever you think you would want to prepare for, what kinds of things would you make sure were there?
Okay. I have an outline that I give all my clients for their 15 to 30 second introduction. The first thing you want to do is thank them for taking the time to meet with you. Let them know how you heard about the position. It could have been something you saw online. It could be a referral from someone. So the first thing you want to do is thank them, tell them how you heard about the position. That's number one. Number two, talk a little bit about your background, what you've done, and how you qualified for the position, a little bit about your work history. The third thing is, and I do this with all my clients, I say to them, you say this, let me share with you 3 things that set me apart from other people that you will be interviewing. Now, you want to say, let me share 3 things that will set you apart from other administrative assistants, other sales representatives. Put that job title in there, and then you say, you give them 3 things that set you apart from other people that they will be interviewing. Then you close the interview by thanking them again for taking the time to interview you, and then you say, I really am interested in this position. I would like to know more about what you're looking for, and I'm sure you'd like to know more about me. What other questions do you have? If you end your introduction with a question, that segues the conversation back to the interviewer, and he will know to go to the next question to ask you. And I have an outline for this introduction. If any of you are interested, please go to my website and request it, and I will be glad to send it to you.
I do have a question around that, Martha.
Okay.
In terms of interviews, what recommendations, what advice can you give someone who gets into an interview where the interviewer just wants to run it from A to Z and you're having a really hard time getting a word in edgewise?
Well, you really have to take control of the interview itself by pulling the interviewer back to why you're there. That's a little bit of a dicey situation, and I think you're going to have to be quite tactful. I don't hear a lot about that out there, but I have to admit that I've been at interviews where the person talks about themselves so much they don't give you an opportunity to tell them why you're there. But you have to pull that interviewer back to why you're there, and that will take some tact. I don't know if there's a set rule, but the most important thing for an interviewee is to pull that person back to reality and why you are there. Like I say, it's going to take a little bit of tech. Really?
So my next question was, you really led right into it. How much control do you feel the interviewee needs to take in the interview? And the question is should they try to control it half and half? Should they try, depending on the situation, should they take over if they're capable? Now, granted, you said earlier in the podcast that this takes some tact, but do you think that they should try to wrest control away from the interviewer if it's going a totally bad direction?
I have to be honest with you that all people that interview may not be very good at it. And it's really up to the interviewee to assess each individual situation. I don't know that there's a pat answer for that, but if you can pull it back, not necessarily in your control, but where you have the opportunity to tell them why you're the best candidate for the position. I don't think it's an easy thing to do. I don't know that there's a set rule, but it's going to take a lot of tact if they're running away with it, not giving you an opportunity to at least tell them why you're the best candidate, because that's the purpose of the interview, is to sell yourself. And not all interviewers give people that opportunity, and they really should, but you're never going to know till you get to an interview how controllable, how the interviewer may have in the situation, because it's an individual thing. Not all people that interview really know how to interview. So
would it be a fair statement, Martha, that, based on that comment, that if you're in an interview, that you may be sitting with an interviewee or a hiring manager or what have you that doesn't do this every day of their life. So you should feel it part of your responsibility to make sure you get your point across, yeah?
Absolutely, but in a tactful way.
Yeah.
You don't want to run over them, even though they may be doing that to you, and try to bring it back to why you're there. And you can always say, you know what, I really would like to talk about the position and what I can do for your company. And then maybe go into something that you feel you would like to share.
Yeah.
But that's, that I don't know that happens that often, but it will happen.
Oh, yeah. I personally have had it happen. So that's the reason I asked, because as soon as you don't put that in your mind as a possibility, then you don't know how to deal with it, if you get into that situation. It's just really tough if you haven't interviewed a lot in your life. But the other question I had, Martha, was do you do practice interviews with your folks?
Absolutely. I have a 20-page handout, Preparing for an Interview, which covers absolutely everything that they need. One of the pages in the 20-page handout has a list of questions that we go through and create answers together. Questions can be either negative or positive, and you've got to know how to answer the negative questions as well as the positive ones. One question that people have a hard time with is, what are your weaknesses? And we cover that question as well.
That's always one they try to trip you up with. What are your weaknesses? And the answer I've gotten in the past that I think is so, I shouldn't say this, but it is so canned, is my weakness is I work too hard.
Well, that's not a very good weakness, because they'll think you'll never get your projects done. So I have the best answer for tell me about your weaknesses. And it's listed in my set of interview questions that are normally asked.
Well, that's really great. We're kind of running down on the clock here, Martha. So I really appreciate you spending time with me today to really talk about the topic of when to prepare for an interview, how to prepare for an interview, and what to prepare for an interview, because it's really a stressful time for most people. And the audience, thank you for listening to us. Thank you for coming to listen to A+ Resumes and Coaching's new podcast. Martha is an expert that's been at it for years. She has all the answers, and if she doesn't, she'll find them for you. So again, thanks for joining us, Martha. I really appreciate it. But until next time, you have spent about 15 minutes, maybe 20, listening to the greatest resume writer and coach in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, you're so
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.